there's something quite eerie, I would say. That may be the word that I would use. There's something quite eerie when this week's Torah portion, every week, part of our tradition, we read a little portion of the Torah so that over a year's time, we complete the total cycle of reading the 5 books of Moses. And every week is assigned a portion of the Torah. And we begin studying the Torah as soon as Shabbat, we began studying the Torah of this week's Torah portion as soon as Shabbat was over last Saturday. As soon as nightfall comes, we begin studying the new weekly Torah portion. And there's something eerie to begin studying this week's Torah portion at the end of a day that brought so much pain, bloodshed, and death to our community. Eerie because this week's Torah portion is called Acharei Mot, which literally means after the deaths. Eerie that such a Torah portion be this week's Torah portion when we also commemorated yesterday Yom HaShoah, Holocaust Remembrance Day. Acharei Mot, after the deaths. And obviously many of us can't help but draw direct lines between those 3 happenstances, between those 3 threads, and see perhaps in the events of last week, Chas v'chalila, God forbid, the beginning of a new cycle of darkness in Jewish history. And the question that is on everybody's mind is, what is our response? What is our response to this moment in time? And this week's Torah portion, the name of this week's Torah portion, Acharei Mot, after the deaths, seem to be asking us that question exactly. Now what? Now what are we going to do? What is going to be our personal, individual response to the events that are befalling the Jewish community? Mirrored this week in the commemoration of Yom HaShoah. What is going to be our response also as a community, as the Jewish people, not only in America, because it's not only happening here, it's happening in Europe as well, globally. And there are 3 answers that I could figure out. And I'll share them with you in the guise of little stories, little vignettes. Because the word vignettes is French. And I just love to using it as often as I can. It's actually one of those words that Americans pronounce correctly. Vignette. As I joined the many rabbis, I think most of the rabbis in the Seattle area came together to Bellevue on Sunday evening to join with the group of Chabad rabbis and the Chabad communities from all around the Puget Sound in just being together and sharing in words and in prayers to face the tragedy that just happened the day before. It was held at the Bellevue Chabad house, which was fitting because the shooting happened in a Chabad synagogue the day before. And the Jewish Federation organized this gathering, and There were really 24 rabbis from everywhere that joined there. There were actually several Muslim women who also came in solidarity, and I'm sure Christian people also joined us. And there were about 200 people that also were there. And it was one of those moments, we don't have a lot in common. Jews that are more from the Reform, maybe conservative, those of us who are on the far fringes of Jewish spirituality, we usually have little in common with ultra-Orthodox and people from the Chabad movement. Our paths rarely cross. But this moment was different. This moment was a moment of unity that I have not experienced in the Jewish community in a very long time. Nothing like tragedy to bring people together. But it doesn't matter, because myself and other rabbis who were there, men and women rabbis from around the Puget Sound, we all felt that we were one with whatever other rabbis from whatever other denominations were around us. The conversations were friendly, welcoming, honoring each other's work, acknowledging that really all of us rabbis are all doing avodah kedusha, holy work, in whichever way our voice gets to expressed. And that each of us are only threads in the tapestry of offerings that the Jewish community brings forth for all who are thirsty or hungry to come and experience. And it was a beautiful moment of acknowledgement that all of us are needed, that all of us belong, that all of us contribute to the spirit of Judaism. Nothing like a common enemy, to bring people together. Nothing like an event like Saturday or like Pittsburgh 6 months ago. For us to realize that those who seek to kill us couldn't care less which synagogue we attend. So perhaps our first response to such events is to come together in oneness and unity. Perhaps our first response, as it happened on Sunday, is to let go of our political differences, to let go of our different views and different modalities of worship and understanding of the divine, to affirm loud and clear, as happened Sunday, that we are one nation, one tribe, in many different colors and shapes and forms. That we stand together. Because divided we will fall. And that was the first vignette. The second one comes to me from something that, in fact, ended up as a failure that began sometime in January when I received an email from an acquaintance of mine who is a beautiful Jewish musician who lives in LA and who is coming to Seattle in June, and emailed me and said, I would love to offer my music with my band for just a couple of hours to the Jewish community. Is it something that you could host? And I said, of course. I'd love to have you at Bet Aleph, and we'll invite everybody around. But when I checked with the church, there was an event here happening in the sanctuary that day. So I reached out to my colleagues. I sent emails to every rabbi around. Most of them also had different events happening in June. But one rabbi, a conservative rabbi from Herzl Ner Tamid, the conservative synagogue on Mercer Island, who over the years became a really good friend of mine and unfortunately is retiring at the end of June. But I sent him YouTubes of my friend's music, and he loved it, which shocked me, because it's very us. But he loved it. And he said, I want to do it in our place. So we met and we started to talk about what it would take, how much it would cost, what we would have to charge. And it seems to be moving along, and I was very hopeful until I get an email from him who said, there is no way for us actually to do this. I just checked with how much it would cost us if we host an event for 200 people, how much it would cost us to have security for that event. It would make the tickets prohibitively expensive. And so we had to abandon the project. I had to email my friend and apologize profusely. Incidentally, he will be here with his band performing at a church because they don't need security, which is good for them. It is becoming more and more expensive for all of us, Jewish organizations, synagogues, institutions, to continue to do what we do. Because now we have to think of things that we were not thinking about before. And we have to include in what we do, if we want to do this event or that event, if we want to, make sure that our kids are safe as they learn for their B'nai Mitzvah program, to make sure the doors are locked, to make sure that, God bless Seattle First Baptist, who completely redid all their doors to be only entered with a security code after 5 p.m. They didn't just do it for us, but I know that they did also for us. And so I felt that what is also needed as a response to what is happening in our community is a sense that we, each and every one of us, need to make sure that we shore up our Jewish institutions, our synagogues, our Jewish organization, that we, as much as we are able, make sure that we can support those organizations financially, that they can keep doing what they are doing, and they can keep keeping us safe as we come together. There is not more an important time to show up in those kinds of ways as well. My third vignette connects me specifically this week. I probably was thinking of her, to my grandmother. I lit a candle for her yard site. My grandmother is a Holocaust survivor, many times over. She came from Poland as a baby, as a few-year-olds, and her family set roots in Paris in the late 20s, early 1930s, because there was work. The Jews were very involved in the schmattes business, the clothing business in Paris, which is why my grandmother was very much into fashion. In fact, she became a fashion designer in her later years. But she always, from the stories I know, always was dressed up to the T, a real Parisian girl, chichi, comme we say in Paris. Always very chic. And when the Nazis came and things changed for the Jews, restrictions began, and the yellow stars became mandatory. She always told me that she picked her favorite clothes, her favorite coats, to sew on them the Star of David, and walked proudly through the streets of Paris, brandishing her yellow star with her hand held high. Now, I'm not making any kind of equivalency between France occupied by the Nazis and what's going on here. Chas v'chalila, God forbid. But I'm invoking my grandmother's memory because I think she has a message for all of us, that in those moments we are to steep ourselves proudly in our Jewish identity. That we are to ground ourselves with great joy and great gusto in our Judaism, however we practice it. That we are to speak it, that we are to connect to it, that we are to embrace it maybe with increased fervor. That this is a time for us to look inward and rededicate ourselves to this identity of ours, proudly, because our voice matters and it will not be silenced, because we will not cower behind our walls waiting for the storm to pass, because we are a nation of survivors and never again. But then there's always, for me, a fourth layer. Because yes, it is important to come together and unify as a community. It is important to financially support all our Jewish institutions. It is critical for us personally to center ourselves anew in our Jewish identity and our Jewish practices. But all of that is happening on the outside. And we can never forget the inner dimension of who we are, the spiritual dimension of who we are. Acharei Mot, after the death. I was thinking about that over and over again this week. And I was thinking, when somebody we love passes away, we feel that the word is falling away from us. We look outside at the world as people continue to go about their regular lives, and we feel the impossibility of it. We feel that in our grief, the word should stop for us, that there is no point of anything continuing. It is as if for a few days, perhaps a few weeks, we are plucked out of the everyday world and allowed and afforded the opportunity to look at it as if from the outside, because we have disconnected through our mourning process, through our pain, through our broken heart. And as we look on from that place, out of time and out of space, out of place, we see what is going on around us, and we have a sense of the absurdity of the ways we in everyday life busy ourselves with all the things we're running for, we're running around for. And we look at that and we feel the unrealness of it all. We look at that and we see the story that we are immersed in that makes absolutely no sense anymore. That this story to which we are slaves is ridiculous when we have the opportunity to step back and center ourselves in what truly matters, in the world that is awakening within ourselves, in matters of the heart, in matters of love, of deep humanity. And perhaps this is a moment for us. This is a moment for us, Acharei Mot, after the deaths, to open that window. To open that window to break free from the trance of that story and look at it as if from the outside and understand the danger of that story. A story that is in fact killing us. A story of hatred. A story of separation. A story of them versus us. Of the enemy and the good guys. A story of if I win, you lose. And if I lose, you win. And I cannot have that. A story of if there are more people that are not white coming to America, then we will lose America. A story of of anger, a story of pain. And so perhaps it is our opportunity to write now a different story. To write a different story from a different place, a story that doesn't reject those who reject us, but a story that invites them into looking at their story and seeing the absurdity of it. Not to make them wrong, but to open their heart, to see that there is more to them than their anger and their hatred. To see that fear doesn't have to drive their every action and their every breath. And to speak a story of embrace. To speak a story of understanding the sacredness of every being. Not just of every being, but of everything. Of every tree. That the way forward is a way that is shared. I think it was Thich Nhat Hanh who once said, the next Messiah is the Sangha. The next Messiah is not an individual. The next Messiah is community. The next Messiah is all of us awakening to the community of one, that we are all part of, wherever we are from, what language we speak, what religion we perform. This is the one Sangha, the one community of which we all belong. Hatred is learned. Violence is incited. So let's unlearn in ourselves and be emissaries and ambassadors to help others unlearn their hatred. כן יהי רצון.